I just wrapped up Elden Ring Nightreign, and I wanted to share some thoughts. And I know this video may be a little late since everything about this game has been said and done, but I really wanted to take my time and make sure I did everything that this game has to offer. So I beat every boss, finished all of the character remembrances, I played through it solo, I played with friends, I played with randoms. Top to bottom, I think I've done everything. And overall, this game is good. I'd even say really good, but it's just a few changes away from being great, for me at least. So let's talk about what Nightreign nails, and where it stumbles a bit. First off, the characters. Straight up the best part of this game. Every character in Nightreign feels distinct, fun to play, and genuinely interesting. FromSoft really brought their A game when it came to designing the Nightfarers, with Wilder probably being my favorite. His kit is some of the most fun I've had with a character in a while. On the surface, he's your typical great sword-wielding knight, but this time with a grapple hook. His grapple turns him into this fast, aggressive playstyle that just really speaks to me. And with an ultimate art that's basically just a short-range cannon blast, he's easily one of the best things about this game for me. So much so that I really hope someone out there can figure out how to just mod him into Elden Ring, so I can do a Wilder playthrough. That would be cool. Although Wilder is my favorite, that's not to say the other characters aren't just as good. They've all been given the same amount of attention to their playstyles. I won't go through each one, but just know that if FromSoft decides to go with this style of character for future games, I'd be okay with that. Now let's talk bosses, specifically the Night Lords. I know I said the Nightfarers were the best part of this game, but it honestly might be the Night Lords. Except for maybe a couple of them. One in particular, but I'll touch on that later. Anyways, the majority of these bosses here are incredible. Especially Libra, Caligo, and the final boss. Libra being this goat demon creature that throws madness everywhere. It's a fast, unpredictable fight, and it's probably, gameplay-wise, my favorite. And Caligo, this massive ice dragon with an amazing soundtrack, is probably tied with the final boss in Atmosphere, which I won't spoil the last Night Lord here, but if you know, you know. The rest sort of range from good to great, except for one that really, in my opinion, just kinda sucks. Like, they all make for good 3-player boss fights, but this one, Maris, or Maris I think his name is, flies around and it's just a really boring fight most of the time. You either have to hit these tentacles or jellyfish to do damage, or wait for him to get in range if you're a melee character. It's overall just not a very good fight. He still looks kinda cool though. Another thing that I think Nightreign does well is its pace. If you're coming from Elden Ring, you might be surprised by how fast this game is. With the new character and boss movement being so quick, it makes combat hectic and way more intense moment to moment. Especially with teamwork being such a big focus here. Which for me is great, I love the faster tempo. But I understand if you prefer the slower, more deliberate flow of the original game. This might not be your thing. Overall, the combat's tight, responsive, and even flashy at times. It scratches that FromSoft itch, but in a new way. I found myself constantly wanting to try new characters, new loadouts, and new approaches just to see what worked best. One more thing I want to mention before I move on to the more negative stuff are the remembrances. I love the lore of these games, and you do get a bit more of that here, but they are sort of hit or miss for me. Like, some of the Nightfarers quests were interesting, but all felt pretty short. And some of the rewards you get from them, like the skins for example, were just copies of the base skin with a slight difference that honestly took me a while to even notice. Not a huge deal, but I thought it was worth mentioning. Okay, so now we get to the rough stuff. And one of my first impressions of the game was, unfortunately, bad performance. They've since fixed the issue I was having, but when this game first launched, I was having full-on game freezes for like up to 10-15 seconds at a time, maybe longer. For a game like this to just freeze in the middle of a run is game-breaking. But like I said, they fixed the issue. Although it does suck that it at times killed my first impression of the game. And just to give you an example, I'll show you my first time beating a Night Lord. And yeah, it was pretty annoying. At first I thought it might be an issue with my PC or internet, but both my friends had the same issue, and with it now fixed, it must have been some network problem on FromSoft's end. And speaking of network, one of the biggest complaints I see from people is the lack of voice chat and crossplay. And while I can't agree those options would be nice, it's not really as big of an issue for me. I don't have anyone on console I play with, but I can understand if this game's player base starts to dwindle at some point. Having all platforms combined would be best. And as for voice chat, I don't know if I've been lucky, but the majority of randoms I've played with have been pretty good. It would still be better if I could talk to them in game. I know playing with randoms will always be a mixed bag, and better communication would help with that. One of the bigger problems I have with the game is the roguelite aspects. I know some people hate when you call this game that because FromSoft doesn't really call it that, but it just is really similar to those kind of games. And honestly, is the best way to describe it, in my opinion. For me, roguelike was a big selling point, but it just doesn't do it that well. Enemies and locations are far too predictable. Runs become very samey after a while, and it's a shame because the combat is so good. If there were more variety in each run, it would really help this game's longevity. And I know not every game needs to last forever. I can still enjoy Nightreign for what it is, but it has a solid foundation I'd love to see expanded on, which I think they can do, even without adding new content. I'm no game dev, so I may be ignorant on how they could do this, but if they were just able to mix up the enemies they already have in-game, I think it would go a long way. There only seems to be a handful of bosses you run into each night, depending on what expedition you choose. But if they just open that to allow any of the night bosses to spawn, and to be clear, I mean the bosses at the end of day 1 and 2, not the Night Lords, I think each one would be a lot more interesting. You might be worried about balance, but if they just scale their health and damage, I don't see why that would be a problem. Some bosses are just inherently harder, I get, but that's how roguelites are, and I just think that it'd be way more fun that way. Limgrave is in a similar situation in that it doesn't really mix up its location enough, which I don't think is as big of an issue if they plan on adding more maps in the future. I do think they should make the shifting earth events happen a little more often though. But even when they do add more content, without the randomization, it'll hit that stale point far too quickly again. So hopefully they have that in mind when going forward. I do want to point out again that even if they plan on keeping the game the way it is and just adding more to it, I'd still be okay with that. Just maybe slightly disappointed after I finish the DLC, especially depending on how much more content they plan on adding. They start pumping this game with more Dark Souls bosses, I'm all for it. Running into the Nameless King and Dancer gave me such a nostalgia hit, I was smiling the whole time. And imagine they add a location from Dark Souls to the game as a shifting earth event, or even a new map. That'd be crazy. The loot in the game is pretty varied, but I'd still like to see more added to the game, as some of the passes are good, but a little boring. Like a 10% buff to dual wielding is fine, but I'd like to see more crazy stuff. For example, there are passives that make different effects happen while you're walking, like fire or madness, or it rains magic arrows, which is cool, but I'd like to see more of that, and a way to lean into that build. Like going to a fire camp has a better chance of finding a passive that makes enemies, I don't know, killed by fire, explode, and cause more fire. So you run into a dense area, kill an enemy, and start a chain reaction of exploding enemies. I don't know, I'm just spitballing here, but you get the point. I know that there is some of that in the game, but it's mostly just weapons you find at these places that have a corresponding element or something. Anyways, I could probably go on about this point, but I don't want to sound too nitpicky, and I don't really want passives to overshadow the gameplay, but if they can get a little more crazy with it and ways that enhance and bring more variety to the game, that's all I'm really trying to get at. I think that's pretty much all I wanted to cover, but I don't want to end this on a negative note, so I just want to say that I'm loving Nightreign and having a blast with it. I've seen a lot of people give it 7 out of 10s, but for me it's at least an 8, with just a few changes away from being a 9. I really hope they continue to support this game, which I'm sure they will, but until then, if you want more Elden Ring, maybe leave a like and subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one. Thanks for watching.